Thanks for coming on. I wanted to get you on because I always admire stories of people that are doing great things, people that are shaking and moving, people that are, mustering the courage to, step out of their comfort zone. And you and I obviously immediately when we met, I think connected on many of those
Yeah.
levels. And so, wanted to get you on, and I think stories are so powerful. So I'm keen to share your story.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying yes. I know it was a bit of a back and forth, but good
Yeah.
to have you on.
Happy
Um,
to be here, mate. It's the first time for everything, isn't there? So,
yeah,
isn't this the part where you're meant to say that, click the subscribe button, click the bell, and
this
get
is
notified.
this is just about stories, man. This is just going to be storytelling. We're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
selling
Nice.
anything here.
No, nice, nice.
It's all about perspective. I mean, the platform is to bring entrepreneurs perspective, and I think similar to yourself, and I can certainly relate. It's that journey that you go through, maybe not necessarily just as an entrepreneur, but
Mm.
as an individual, as an employee, as a professional, and that process you go through and all the learnings, the ups and downs. But what I have learned is that through perspective, you can perhaps fast track or kind of create awareness to not go through challenges or avoid mistakes. And so for me, this platform is all about perspective and story. So we're not selling anything here, mate.
Right.
All good
I was ready to
stories.
buy the knives. Anything you want to sell me, I'm in. I'm in. Give it
Sign
to
you
me.
up. Sign you up.
Exactly.
So, mate,
Yeah.
for the viewers' sake, and actually, as you and I have been kind of tic-tacking, I've even got to know a little bit more of your backstory as well. But for the viewers' sake, maybe let's just start with a quick introduction of Tommy. Like, where did you grow up? Who had the biggest influence in your life? And kind of talk me through the kind of early stage of your life. I do think that it's such a foundational period for everybody.
Right. So I was from a city in Australia called Brisbane, and or
Brizzy.
Brisbane, as the Americans would call it. But it's it's a relatively small city. It's only got 2 million people or so. Um, and grew up in Brisbane. I've got a pretty small family. I've just got a sister, and as I kind of grew as a kid, I kind of grew reasonably quick. I'm 6'7", so I'm reasonably tall, and so naturally I was drawn to sport, and I think that was also because I had ADHD as a kid. So I was
Mm,
bouncing off the walls and and terrorizing our dogs and all that sort of stuff. And I think my parents just wanted to wear me out by the time I got home, so I would maybe relax a little bit. And by virtue of that, I ended up playing lots of sports, and I found that that was something that I really loved, and kind of from there, it sort of I guess I followed a life kind of wanting to be an athlete, or
mm,
wanting to be an Olympian. Um, and in terms of I've had so many people in my life, and even when I grew up, as influence for me, but it was probably my father. I think
mm,
most people it's a parent, or someone really close, and for me it was my old man was he's got such an amazing life, and came out to Australia as a migrant after the war. And my auntie had to in Netherlands, where they were from, it was under the Nazi control.
yeah.
And so my auntie and my father's household would actually house Canadian soldiers.
Mm,
And when the Nazis would come, they would have them in the toilet in the lavatory, and my auntie would have to sit on the toilet and pretend that she's going to the toilet, and there were Canadian soldiers. And my grandfather was captured by the Nazis, and he was forced to teach the prisoners and the Jews to spray paints to spray paint planes. And he escaped because I think he was under minimal security, and
mm.
he escaped. And then it took him about 3 months of living in the sewers and eating rats and all sorts of stuff, and walking at nighttime to get back to the Netherlands. And then the whole family, kind of half the family, went to, I think, America, and the other half went to Australia. And so, my dad had a pretty hard life, grew up in Australia without being able to speak any English, and was beaten up every day. Back in those days, Australia wasn't, a very multicultural country. And so, my father had a pretty tough life, and achieved a lot for what he did. Went on to study, I think, 2 or 3 degrees with a scholarship, and became a lawyer and all that sort of stuff. So my dad was a really, really big influence in my life, and he was very much very loving, but it was
Mhm.
also very tough, and wanted me to be like that, I think. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah, here we are in 2021, like whinging about our freedoms and not being able to leave the front door, but often forgetting kind of all of the other world events that have come before us with our grandparents and our parents, and some of the real shocking, challenging times that they've gone through.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I think they'd probably look back and laugh at us, at our inconvenient life when we're not able to go and travel and, and all that sort of stuff when they had to deal with things, I think, that were much, much worse than what we had to deal with. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. What are some of the core kind of values or principles that your dad kind of taught you, and what kind of sticks with you today?
So there was a lot of, there's one point where I started writing stuff down about my father, and I wanted to get a book written about him. But I think probably one of the two ones that were probably the most important in my life was my father always used to say, not this little black duck about things.
Mm,
And he had this saying, which was, most people in life want to take it easy. They want to be employees. They want to have a predictable life. And, they want to live in their own comfort zone. And my dad said, not this little black duck. I want to live life on my own terms. I want to push myself. I want to achieve everything that I can. And whatever I achieve is because of my hard work. And
mm.
I'll never give up. And so that was like something my father, it was like a mantra my dad used to drill into me as a kid.
Yeah.
And everything was always like, don't, be the black duck kind of thing, and don't be like everybody else, and kind of follow your dreams and all that sort of stuff. And the other one was just tough love. When I think I was maybe 21 or something, and I started a business, and it failed, and I put everything into it as maybe like 20 or $30,000, which is all I had.
Mm,
And I called him, begging for him to help me, and he just said, "Look, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to." He said, It's going to be tough love, but I put you through the best education that I could put you through, and the rest of your life is on you. And if you fail, and I help you, then I'm not doing you any justice, and you need to find the way to pull yourself out. He said, "Go and get Social Security, get the pension, or not the pension, the dole, I think they call it,
yeah. Yeah.
and go find your own job and get yourself through it. And if you can get through that, and if you can stare into the abyss of having nothing, and you can get yourself through that and build a business from there and be successful in life, then you're indestructible. Nothing can stop you." And that was a very, very hard bit of advice from me in my life. And my father and I, we fell out for a while because of that. And it's
Mm,
only kind of later on that I kind of came to realize just that it was probably one of the most important lessons in my life, funny enough.
yeah. And
Yeah.
here we are, two little black ducks.
Two little black ducks, exactly. Waddling along.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Going back to that kind of move into sport. Obviously, as you said, you're a force to be reckoned with. Literally, physically, and also in the business sense. But just going to sports. I know that you played sport at the kind of the highest level. What was your life like through the kind of sporting period of your life, and what was that sport?
Yeah. So it was water polo, a sport I really love. Look, I think growing up, I was probably what you call a misunderstood kid.
Aren't we all?
Just really misunderstood. And I probably am still today. But I found sport to be something that I really loved, and water polo was kind of a melting point of a few sports that I was playing reasonably well, and I was doing reasonably well at swimming, reasonably well at basketball and rugby and Aussie rules. And so water polo was kind of like a melting point of all of those sports. And
Yeah.
because of that, I really loved it. So I naturally kind of was drawn to water polo, and I had some initial success as a kid. And then from there, that was kind of my focus as a child. Going through high school, I just wanted to be an Olympian. I wanted to play for Australia at the Olympics, and that was my life. I just wanted to be a sportsman and nothing else. And then I think I was maybe 17 when I moved from Churchie, which was my school, to down to Canberra, and I lived at the Australian Institute of Sport for a number of years, where you basically just train to be an elite athlete, and it's kind of the training or the launch pad for Olympians,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, for everybody listening, I mean, the Australian Institute of Sport is la creme of la creme institute. It is the place that you go to as an Australian, which Australia in general is quite a sports centric, country and culture. But this is the epicenter where people are kind of catapulted into the top echelon of sports, right?
Yeah. Not everyone makes it, by the way, but
Yeah.
the theory is you get enough people there, and obviously the best ones are going to rise to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of talk me through, because I know that there was a point where you transitioned from, athlete to pursuing business. And so talk to me about that transition. What guided that decision making, and what was that decision? What was that pivotal point that you kind of decided and you pivoted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I absolutely loved water polo, and I'd been playing. I would say, in fringe. I was in the open team, but I was a fringe player. I was pretty young, and I think I just finished my degree, my master's at Sydney Uni, and I'd come out of a pretty serious blood clot injury before, and got back to getting in shape and playing in National League. And I think it was, I mean, during my time in my injury and my time away, it gave me time to reflect on what was important for me in my life, and what was it really that I wanted to achieve. And prior to that, I'd just kind of blindly been focused on water polo, and this is what I want.
Mm.
And I'd made the Australian team. I certainly wasn't a key player in the Australian team, but
Yeah.
I'd made the team. And then I suddenly started to reflect about, what's important in life, and, what do I really want out of life? And these were the kind of questions that were burning, inside of me. And, I think things have changed now. You see a lot more players who are in the open team who have their own businesses.
Yeah.
Prior to that, there was a typical path, which was, you're an Australian player, you're kind of, knocking on the door of the Australian team or the Australian Olympic team, and you generally follow the path to Europe. You play professionally in Europe for a number of years. You improve because the standard in Europe is the best, and then from there, you cement yourself in the Australian team. You go on and play in the Olympics and so on and so forth. But the problem with it is, I also saw a number of people who were in their sort of mid 30s to late 30s, and they'd only just started their careers professionally, and that was kind of
Mm.
that was the thing. I mean, if you're an NBA player, even if you only get to play a couple of seasons, like, your life's good, right? Like, you got a couple of million in the bank, and you don't really need to worry about a lot of things. But I think when you're playing sports like water polo, it's kind of different. You're making good money, but you're not making life-changing money.
Yep.
So you still need to be thinking about my life. And so, I kind of realized that what I wanted to do is I wanted to be a business person. I didn't know in what sense. I just knew that I wanted to have my own business. And I really was always very interested in business. I mean, I hated reading the newspaper, but I would read the business section of the newspaper.
Yep.
And so I kind of, it was probably a mixture of two things. Maybe not being in the team as a concrete player, and maybe being a fringe player, and also kind of having to evaluate my life, I guess, also because I wasn't a key player in the team. And so
Mm.
I remember a conversation I had, I think, with an Australian selector, and the conversation was, look, I don't really want to, go ahead with this. I'd like to sort of pursue business. And and in their eyes, I was foolish because, I'm an Australian player who's young, and and I guess maybe gifted, and it would be such a waste if I was to kind of go down that path. But for me, my response was, well, I see business as my Olympics,
Yeah.
And and I want to do that. And that was a really, really, really tough decision for me.
Yeah.
And it just kind of changed my course of my life from, you know, my entire life being focused on wanting to be an athlete and wanting to go to the Olympics and all of that, to all of a sudden wanting to pursue something that I didn't even know I was good at. I mean, I didn't even know if I would be a good business person, and I still don't, by the way. I didn't even know if it was going to mean anything.
Yeah.
And I basically cut off my opportunity to make the Olympic team, and I don't know whether I would have made it or not. But it
Do
was
you have any regrets?
nevertheless, it was a very, very hard decision. Regrets. I just think you can't regret things in life. I think if you
Mm,
regret something, it means nothing, right? So you can learn from your past mistakes and all those sorts of things. But if you have regret,
yeah.
what is that going to achieve, right? So do I have regrets in making that decision? Absolutely not. I
Mm,
think every decision you go, you move forward and you try and make the best of your assessment of that situation. And sometimes you make mistakes. But you just got to keep making decisions and keep picking yourself up and moving forward. So I'm
yeah.
not going to look back and say, well, I regret it, and I wish I was at the Olympics and all of that. It's just not the case. Um, do I look at the team, the Australian team, and go, wouldn't it be amazing to still be able to play? Absolutely. But do I regret the decision? Definitely not.
Maybe you'll make a comeback. Maybe
Yeah,
later,
maybe the Masters.
later in the 40s.
Maybe when I get really old, I might be peaking. Might be able to lose some more weight, by then. Yeah,
But in all seriousness,
yeah.
do you see yourself getting connected back into the team at any point? Maybe not as a player, but as a, I don't know, advisor, coach, mentor.
That's an interesting thing. And I've thought about this. I don't know. I
Mm,
really don't know. I love the sport. I loved playing the sport, and I love the physicality of the sport. I don't know whether I would be a good coach
okay.
and a good player. I mean, I don't think I was a great player. I was a good player, and maybe I could have been a great player. Who knows? But
Yeah.
a good player or even a great player doesn't necessarily make a great coach, and it's not been something that I've had some kind of burning passion to do.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but I won't ever say no to something. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I might end up doing that next year and I find my calling. Who knows?
But mate, like I
Yeah.
think, just the overall story, like for me, a couple things, um, decisions, right? And you and I were talking about this offline. It's like, it's really, I mean, all our lives are decisions, right? We're
Yeah.
making decisions every day of our life, from the point we wake up to from the time to the time that we go to sleep, one foot in front of the other, left, right, yes, no. It's like decision making, but these pivotal decisions, and creating a system or a muscle or even intuition to navigate or at least guide our decisions.
Mm.
So important. I mean, I can completely relate to it. I mean, when I moved to Asia, I can kind of draw a parallel to my decision in, leaving a corporate job in Samsung, where Sydney's pretty nice,
Yeah.
great lifestyle, live near the beach, got a great salary, and drop all of that and kind of step out and go into, a Wild West kind of place called Asia, which I didn't really know anything about. Like, so I just, I think decision making is such a critical thing that people need to be more aware of. I mean, I think there is an intuition part to it. Like, you got to follow your gut and what feels right, but there is a bit of just self-awareness to be able to have a criteria for making decisions.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing is, like, the fact that you gotta make the decision up yourself, right? Because, whether it's a coach or whether it's a scout or whether it's even your mom or dad. And I think that's the most important one, because mom and dads are often the ones that are most wrong, because they're the ones that are just kind of looking out for your safety and your security, right? But
Right.
um, just kind of washing out, or at least allowing what is relevant and useful for consideration, but ultimately making that decision yourself. I can relate to it. So I think there's some really good lessons there. So what did you go to next? Like, so when you left water polo, how old were you when you kind of left that space?
Do you know? I don't know. I think I was probably in my 20s. I think it's early 20s.
Yeah.
And I'm 35 now. I know I may look 40, but I'm 35. And Yeah, so I was in my mid-20s, and I just decided I wanted to do business. I had no idea what that even meant. I just sort of felt like that was what I needed to do, and so from
Mm,
there, it was all about, and it's always been about for me, identifying patterns, and from those patterns, that then leads to a process, and from that process, you tweak that process, you change that process over the years, and those processes become rules, and those
mhm.
rules is kind of what you live by. And that's kind of how I've always sort of done business. It's been a learning process for me.
Yeah.
And and so when I finished that and I made that decision, the first thing I wanted to do was to learn about every single business. So so what is it that makes a business profitable? What industry is it in, and how does it make its money? How does it find its customers?
Mm,
Um, how does it get paid? Does it get paid on terms? Does it get paid up front? What are the net margins looking like? Those sorts of things I was very interested in, and I'd been working at an accounting firm, and and so what I would do is I would ask my friends to give me these IBIS reports, and so I think it's called IBIS World, and they do these kind of industry reports, and they give a lot of information. And for me, that's what I wanted to do. So I would bug my friends to always give me these IBIS reports because I think they're maybe $70 to $100 each. But
yeah.
if you work in these accounting firms, it's free, right? So I'd always be like, oh, can you send me? I'm looking for this IBIS report on this industry and that industry and whatever, whatever. And I was always reading things, reading newspaper articles. I was kind of watching a lot of videos. And for me, it was just all about sucking up as much information as I could because I knew nothing about this, right? So it's like, well,
Mm,
I want to do it. I don't know how to do it, so I need to learn kind of, what happens to people who are successful. And it's not just about the motivational aspect. I mean,
yeah.
everyone can get up on a stage and tell you like, oh, starting a business is easy. Follow this 1 to 9 steps. But the reality is, it's completely different
Got to
for
put in the
every single
work.
business. You've got to put the hard work in. I mean, as Elon Musk says, it's like chewing glass and staring down the abyss. As you go from a business, and it's like you start the business, as he says, with positive, with such a positive vibe, and then you
Yeah.
find challenges along the way. And so, as your business goes from turning over the first $100,000, you've got challenges,
Mm,
because you need to find out, you can have all the best logos in the world, and you can have all the followers and stuff, but until you get that product in the customer's hands, you just don't know whether you have a product that's worthwhile. And so getting that first 100,000 is definitely the hardest. And then from there, you've got all these other hurdles. So getting from 100 to $500,000 to getting to the million, and then from a million to getting to like $5 or $10 million a year, those all require very, very big changes along the way and challenges. And so if you can't continually be working hard at overcoming all those challenges, you just won't make it, and you just can't get to the next step.
yeah. Some good principles there. So when you came out of water polo and kind of got straight into just educating yourself, you did your MBA, I believe.
No, I did a master's in
So you did your
commerce.
masters.
So it's not quite the MBA. It was in accounting and marketing. So and I hate numbers. So go figure.
There you go.
Yeah. One
Fill
and one
some of
is
the
three, right?
fill some of the. What was your first business adventure? Like, where did you go from there?
So my first business was a middleware software for a point of sale system for restaurants that would deal with uh, the changes in demand of that restaurant. So for instance, you have a restaurant, you might get busy at 11 a.m. and busy at sort of 3 p.m.,
Yep.
but you have nothing going on between that time. And what this middleware did is it basically took the CSV data dumps from these, basically the data files from a point of sale system, and interpreted that information to understand kind of where your business was busy and where it wasn't busy. And then it would kind of build um, daily deals based on those times. So if you came to this restaurant at this time, you could get X amount of discount. And
Yep.
that was my first kind of idea. And I built that business to raise money, to have valuations and all these sorts of crazy things. And what I realized with that failed business was, you just need to get the fundamentals right in businesses. And I think a lot of people, we can talk about this later if you like, but a lot of people, I think these days, are following raising money and valuations, and
Mm,
what their net worth looks like, and self promotion and all that sort of stuff. when really what's more important is the fundamentals of the business and getting that right. And I learned that in my first failure,
Yeah.
because that business it was never going to make money. If I didn't raise money, it was never going to make any money. It was burning cash on both sides, because we had customer acquisition, and then we had restaurant acquisition,
Mm.
and there was no way that this could really ever be a profitable business. And so, you're either building a business to scale it to a certain extent,
Mm.
to get that critical mass and to get that network effect.
Yep.
But if you're not raising money to get to that point, and then if you don't have the right fundamentals, then you're just going to run out of money and lose everything.
Yeah.
So, and I've got lots of friends who, have started businesses, and, they wanted to raise money, and they're working on this whole valuation and stuff, and they're not making anything for themselves. And 5 years down the track, it's like you've been working very hard on an idea, and you've got a great valuation, on paper of what you're worth, but you don't really have a great business. And instead, for me, the focus was like, if I treat the business as though it's not going to raise any money, I build, I focus on getting the fundamentals right of the business to build a profitable business.
Yeah.
And if I can build a profitable business that's scalable and has all the right hallmarks of what I like in a business, based on, again, the rules that I've kind of created from my past, then I
Mm.
don't need money, and I don't need somebody else's money. And if the money does come, it's going to be to scale it, or for whatever. But if you don't get the money, you're not dead.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Call me old school, but
Yeah.
I have I've never really understood that approach to business, because for me, kind of business 101 is you're in the business to make a profit. And you do look at, especially now with the amount of tech, now with the pandemic, obviously the tech sector is just blowing up. It's one of the only kind of sectors that's really kind of quadrupled or just done crazy amount of growth. But you see so many tech businesses that are just going for these crazy valuations, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Just, again, stepping back at kind of business 101, you're in it to make a profit, unless you're a non-for-profit, right? Unless you're a non-for-profit and you're willing and you wanting to donate everything or do something for the betterment of humanity. It just seems pretty crazy to me. So let's get into these core principles then, right? Because I think this is important, for anybody that is just starting a business and, trying to get some core fundamentals under their belt, or getting a kind of a set of principles to guide them moving forward, or even maybe they're kind of more mature and they're thinking about, bringing in money or whatever. But what are the core principles that you kind of live by in your business now that you've gone through a number of kind of successes and failures?
Yep. So I've got a few. So, and by the way, I'm not a guru, and this is what I've developed based on, what I've learned and what works for me. And I think also the businesses that I'm involved in. So it may not be applicable to everything, but my first thing is, you've got to be just really critical with your time. And, you always have to treat your time like a taxi. Your meter is always ticking. And, one thing you learn very quickly when you have multiple businesses is the most important thing for you is your time. And where you apply that time has to be to what's going to give you the best outcome, right? And so, people talk about passion, following your passion and all that sort of stuff. And there's people who are obviously successful in following their passion. For me, it wasn't so much about passion, but it was about the underlying fundamentals of businesses. And then when you can get an idea that you're kind of thinking of, and that idea then can create livelihood for other people, and then you get successful with that, and it starts to generate money from an idea and from something that's vapor to making money, then you get passionate in that. And it's like that child, who plays a lot of different sports, and he plays one sport and he's, not very good compared to his peers. You find that kid gets demoralized by that sport, doesn't want to play the sport. He finds another sport that he plays that he seems to gel well with. He's got the right, maybe genetics for, and he suddenly gets passionate about that. He's passionate about it ultimately because he's been successful with it.
Yeah.
So I think the passion comes, and it's a byproduct of you doing something reasonably well and having some success along the way.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to pursue, and just go, well, I'm going to do online education because I'm passionate about it, or I'm going to do software development because I'm passionate about that, or I'm going to, I'm going to do, I'm passionate about real estate. You become passionate about education, and I still am. You become passionate about software development and all of those sorts of things as a byproduct of actually being involved in that business, learning about it. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, I think the idea of getting, finding passion, I think it's too loosely thrown around these days, and also it's a trip up, right? It's a trip up. You look at so many people that are. I just had a conversation with a guy back in Australia, wickedly smart. He's worked in the telco space ever since he was out of university. Did his MBA through them. Wickedly smart, but he's now leaving the telco space, and he's kind of. We had a lot of just one-on-one time. He's kind of we're throwing different ideas on what he can do kind of post telco. Yeah. And he's tripping up on like, what is my passion? Yeah. And, I think to your point, it's like that process of just getting started and finding the passion in what you do. Yeah. And I also think that there's a point, like, and I certainly went through it. So when we were growing the business in Asia, I probably got 4 years in, and I did find myself wavering a little bit in terms of where I wanted to spend my time. And somebody said something to me that just resonated. It's like, you have two choices. You either get out and sell your business, or get out and put somebody else in the business, or you find your passion. You discover your passion, you rediscover your passion. And from that conversation, I had to go away and just kind of really do some internal thinking, and again, decisions, make an important decision that, and clearly my decision there was to double down and create a bigger vision, that was bigger than what I was thinking at that time. Because for me, that's always been my passion. It's like, have a vision and have something that's bigger than you, that's bigger than you can even imagine. And that's something to get up and just strive for and work at every day. And so, I mean, that's what I did. Hence the kind of, and we had a conversation, you and I mean, I think it was actually at that point, you and I was kind of, I came to you and said, mate, like, I want to think about my options, exit the business, or, and actually your advice actually was, I didn't tell you this, but your advice was part of the discovery of going out and just structuring a deal that made sense, that was accretive, and that made sense for both private equity, and that made sense for me in terms of the next vision, which was brick and mortar plus master license, and just owning that whole ecosystem. So I forgot to say thank you.
No, I'm glad. I think with every person that maybe says thank you, there's a lot of people that have probably got the advice wrong. So it's good to hear that at least I got it right with one person. Yeah. So with that kind of that whole thought process around your time is so critical.
Yeah.
And so, and the reason why I kind of digressed a little bit off to the passion side is, if your time is scarce, and there's only so much of that time that you have, you need to apply that time to where you will get the most amount of outcome for your time. Because don't forget, you're going for the outcome. So if you're worrying about following that passion, and maybe that passion may not be the right business, then you're spinning your wheels in the wrong direction, working on the wrong thing. And so for me, it was like, if you're critical with that, and there's only so many businesses you can be involved in a given day, so many ideas that you can pursue, you need to find the best ideas. So if you're finding those best ideas, what do you need? You need a process to be able to assess businesses and business ideas, to understand what ideas are going to be disruptive. What does the market look like that you're entering? Are you entering a really competitive market? Because if you do so, you need to be exponentially better than everybody else with your product offering. And you need to be significantly cheaper. And so you need to know all that information. So for me, it was the assessment component of the business, because of the limit of time that we all have. If you had unlimited time, then you wouldn't have to worry about what you're pursuing, because you pursue everything. But if you have a limit to that time, you need to be very critical in where you spend that time. And so because you need to be critical of that time, you need to be very critical on what those ideas are going to be that you pursue. And that's why, when it comes to things like what you're saying with the passion, you need to also understand what's passionate about for you in your life. And you need to apply that to your life, not necessarily pursue that as a business. You can pursue that as a business and be successful. I'm not saying that you don't. For me, I didn't want to do that. I would prefer to create time in my life where, for me, what kind of brings me energy is kind of treating my business and my life now like a swim set, where
Mm.
you have your sprints and you do your whole swim set, and then you rest for a few minutes. And so my rest for a few minutes is kind of every 2 months. I like to go away and travel overseas and go away for 10 to 12 days, no more normally than 12 days, because that's when I'm itching to go back to work.
Yeah.
But 12 days is good for me. And I like to go snowboarding, or it might be, like to Africa and photograph animals, or, to get away and just kind of like allow me to reset, allow me to see, what have I been doing in my business over the last 2 months? Have I achieved what I wanted to do? What are some of the hurdles that I've experienced, and where am I going to go? Am I actually going in the right direction? Do I need to change where I'm going? And you need to have the ability to look into you as a person. So like, what are my flaws? What am I doing wrong? If there's certain things that the business needs and I can't provide that, then I need to find somebody who does, who can provide that for me.
Yeah.
So you need to have that. You need to be reflecting very deeply about yourself, about the businesses and the ideas. And you cannot do that if you're stuck in the day to day. And so if you're
Mm.
working day in, day out, every day, and you don't have that reflection, then it's very difficult to be able to kind of find where you're going to go with the business, what you're going to do next. And also for me, it's just great to be able to reinvest in myself. So just find my balance. You go off and then you find your balance,
Yeah.
and you invest in, relationships. So, if you're a founder, it's hard work. You're going to be working long hours, and
Mm.
it's also hard to have the perfect relationship with your friends, with your family, everybody, because there is so much time that is required from it. And so you need those times to press reset. You need those times to invest in your family and
Mm.
have those times that are so sacred to you, because there's always something to do. Like if you want to work really hard, guess
Yeah.
what? You can work really, really hard because there's
Yeah.
always something you need to do. So if you don't prioritize your time and
Yeah.
prioritize where you spend that time and what business ventures you look at, and know why you're pursuing those businesses. And if
Yeah.
you can't then also be critical with your time and create and obviously know what brings you passion in your life, what gives you fulfillment, and make sure that you create that as a priority in your life, then you're going
Mm.
to be unhappy and you're just going to be working your butt off. And you may not even be working your butt off in the right business that's going to
Yeah.
get you the right outcome. So
Yeah.
so all of those things together, I think, are very, very important.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's all about questions. And I always advocate this and try to kind of just always remind myself personally. It's like, what are the questions that I'm asking myself, and what questions do I need to be asking myself? And it is an evolution, to be frank.
Yeah.
Like as you go through business, like, where you are when you start, you're kind of not thinking about it. Although I think you could consciously stop and maybe ask some good questions so you don't trip yourself up. But stage by stage, there's just a different pace and a different subset of questions that's needed. And I think, to your point, like one example being, when you start off, I think it's a really, really good point. It's like matching your time to the outcome. Well, first of all, what is the outcome? Is it a monetary outcome, which is great because it's easy to measure? It's like, and for me, that was I did have a point in my business where I said, well, I was spending so much time on an area of my business that when I looked at it structurally, when I looked at it from a scalability perspective, it didn't match up. And
Yeah.
so I had to pivot myself. I created an offshoot business with a different structure, with a different focus, with a different team that would then be much more scalable, that would allow me to get, closer to the outcome. But I wasn't connecting those two because I didn't ask that question. It was like,
Mhm.
what is that outcome that I must achieve?
Yeah.
And it's true because you can get so busy. You can get so busy in the minutia of everything. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you stop and, well, you stop and
Where the
you're
hell
fucking,
are we?
yeah, where are we?
Started down this path, and it's all of a sudden it's kind of going, over there.
And you're
Uh,
burnt out. Your
totally.
cortisol levels are, rock bottom, and
No
you
one likes
are
you.
no
No one
one
wants to
like,
talk to you. Your girlfriend doesn't. You don't have time for her, and your family thinks you're dead. And what have you got for it? You
yeah,
know. Yeah.
totally, totally. What do you do? So what you said for you for the reset, it's snowboarding, going on trips, photographing in Africa, anything else that
Yeah.
you do to really kind of just balance yourself? Because I think even if you're in a corporate job, it's important, right? But especially if you're
Yeah.
running your own business, anything else that you kind of do to make sure you keep
I mean,
that
not
mental
not
game?
not to be really really cliche here, but reading. I'm always reading books. I'm trying to make time to read books. I don't read. I mean, you see these things on your Instagram, like Bill Gates reads X amount of books a month. I mean, who
Mm.
knows if that's even true? But I mean, it does kind of make sense. I try and read a lot. I don't read anything like that, like 20, 30 books or whatever. I mean, I'll be lucky if I get through 5 books in a month.
Yeah.
Um, and but it's all business related, and it's always about either business or maybe even cognitive biases, or behavioral psychology, and that sort of stuff. It really interests me.
Mm.
So for me, reading is great. I think it's always good to learn. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can also learn from other people's mistakes and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Going away on holidays and reflecting is unbelievable, not just from the business point of view, but from your own kind of mental space. And I just love being on planes. So it's really traveling, but
Mm.
it's this thing where you're cut off from the world.
Mm.
No one can contact you, and I'll tell the air hostess, don't disrupt me. I put my my noise canceling earphones on, and everyone's asleep, and I'm awake, and I bring a notepad, and I just start thinking about things, and I
Yeah.
start, and I love it. And I think some of my best ideas have come to me on flights,
Something
because
about it, isn't it?
it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I really love it. If only I could just recreate that, and not have to to get in the air. That would be perfect.
I'm gonna look this up. I think
Yeah.
there must be some sort of chemical reaction that you get when you travel or you're put in new environments or you're on an airplane. Because I agree, it's like it's quite magical.
Yeah.
Um, Mate, I want to ask you something. So in business, especially when you're starting, there's a level of kind of recklessness and energy. It's kind of like just you're like a teenage boy just with testosterone, and you're kind of just running around just messing shit up, right? It's like but what do you think in terms of the balance between having that energy and that tenacity, but also humility in business?
Uh, yeah. So this is a really interesting question, and I might just answer it based on, I guess. Well, I'm only going to base it based on how I feel, but
Yeah.
also what I've experienced. I think when you've got a burning desire for something, and you've got a burning desire to start a business, and that business starts to be successful, I think you feel a need to kind of go to everyone, hey, like, I've arrived, look at me, and screw you all, I went and did it, and and all that sort of chest beating kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's the first step. And it's that, like, I really need to show everybody that I've somehow validated, and then what'll happen is you'll fail, because businesses go up and down, and all that sort of stuff, and then people come out of the woodwork and be like, ha ha, kind of thing. Um, a- and that's kind of a process that I think you go through, because maybe you feel the need to sort of, to let everyone know that, hey, like, I worked my ass off for this damn thing, and I feel like I need some recognition,
Yeah.
and so that's why you can kind of understand why people go for these awards of, like, I don't know, the Young Rich List and all that sort of stuff, because it's like, hey, I've arrived,
Yeah.
right? So I think you have that, and I think, you know. I'm still learning about a lot of things in life, and about myself and all of that
Mm.
sort of stuff, right? But for me, you start out with that, and then you kind of realize that no one really gives a damn.
Mm.
Like, you're doing that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're telling everyone, look at me, for yourself, to make yourself feel better.
Mm.
And and hopefully it gets to a point where, for me, it was like, well, it doesn't matter. It
Mm.
doesn't matter what what award I get, or who I am, and any of that sort of stuff. What matters is whether I'm happy, and am
Yeah.
I in a happy place personally? Do I feel good about myself? Is the business giving me the right outcome that I want in my life? And if that is the case, then what else matters? And so I
Yeah.
think that whole humility, comes, at a later stage, where you start to look back, and you look look at some of the posts that maybe you've made and you cringe and you go, oh shit, did I say
Put yourself
that?
in, put yourself in check.
I can't believe, but that's what happens. And
It
I
is.
think that I
Yeah.
think it's a natural progression of, I really want something so badly, and I've worked my absolute ring off to get there, and I want everyone to know that I'm there. I want my medal. I want to stand on the podium, and I
Yeah.
want to let them know. And okay, so now I've got my medal. So then what? Well,
Mm.
what's more important for me? Okay, well, having the right life, being able to have the things that bring me joy, being able to spend my time where I like, be able
Yeah.
to travel where I want. Those sorts of things become more important. What kind of father am I going to be like? If I'm
Yeah.
going to have a family, those
Yeah.
sorts of things become more important. I think naturally you go away, hopefully you go away from that whole chest beating
Yeah.
component, and you move more towards that. Okay, I just want to I'd like to just enjoy my life. That would be
Yeah.
a better outcome.
Well, that's right. And some people don't, right? Some people don't move
Yeah.
away from that. I certainly admire, and I thoroughly enjoy being in the presence of people that are wickedly smart and have achieved great things, but they've just got a huge amount of humility. And
Right.
I think it's also a really core principle for stepping into leadership. And sure, I think some people say some people are natural born leaders, but I think we grow as leaders. We create self-discovery and we figure out who we are. And for me personally, I think humility is a big part of it. If you are leading a team, having the emotional intelligence to know when to waver between assertiveness and being direct and getting an outcome and actually leading, and then also being empathetic and having humility. I think for me that's a huge part, and I admire it in great people.
Yeah, and if only we could have all of that at the right time. I'm still there's still a lot of things about me that I don't like, that I'm trying to change, and I certainly don't always know, when to fall into those different areas. So I think for anyone that can do that really well and can be a
Yeah.
leader, I don't think I'm a leader in any way. I think I'm good at bringing people together, but I think anyone who's really good at that very much is a great skill.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be everything and to everybody. And for me, it's been more about being honest with what my shortcomings are. So
Yeah.
if there's certain things I'm just really not good at, like I'm not particularly good at always dealing with people. And so just because I think I'm a bit abrasive and a bit honest, and and that's not always a good thing. So for me, I have business partners that look after certain things that I'm not good at,
Yeah.
that's not to say that I shouldn't be working on it, right? And I think you absolutely need to be working on being better, but you need to also be honest with yourself and say, okay, look, I'm not
Yeah.
good at this part.
Yeah.
I've got somebody else, like my business partner, Steve. He's amazing.
Yeah.
I can be on a call and be like, effing blah blah blah. You tell this, and Steve's like, yeah, no worries. And he's like, Tom's really happy, but he just thinks that his only suggestion would be, and so he's great like that. And I think you need people who can plug your holes. That's a really bad analogy, but but you need someone who can fill the gaps. And can't do it. Anyway, you just need someone that can pick up the things that you drop. Yeah, I think you get what I mean. I'm going to stop. It's just going to get worse.
Quick commercial break.
Yeah. We need to cut to a break right now.
Oh God.
Shit.
So good.
Oh. Yeah.
So mate, woo. We'll wrap up pretty soon. I got a couple more questions for you though.
No dramas.
Connecting.
I think you were going to connect with sport and business too.
Yeah, connecting, sport and business. I think a lot of people, and you jump on social media and you see a lot of parallels and kind of analogies between top performers in sport and the business arena. So, having lived it, what are some of the core kind of connections that you live by? Having gone through playing at top of your game and being an athlete and also in business.
Yeah, look, I think business and sport are just very, very similar in many, many remarks. I mean, so firstly, when you finally decide that you want to get to the elite level in a sport, you don't just decide, okay, I want to play water polo and next week I'm going to be touring with the Australian team in Europe. That just doesn't happen.
Mm.
It's a continual process, and you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice a lot to do that. You may have to move to another country. You may have to, but you need to be willing to work out every day and work towards that goal. And business is like that. Business is not for everybody, and it is incredibly difficult, and it is continually difficult, right?
Mm.
Because when you're an employee, you work Monday to Friday, and you every 15 and 30, your money appears in the bank account, and you don't need to think about where that comes from. It just comes, right? And when you have your own business, you're thinking more about, how do I turn this money into more money, to hire more people, to do more things, to create more money. And it's less about kind of for yourself. There's hard work. It just like it is with sport. Like it's the same kind of thing. You need to be working your ring off, pushing yourself. You need to be assessing, like, where do I need to fix things? And it's about, okay, I need to be stronger in the gym. I need to swim faster. I might have to lose some weight. I might have to do all these sorts of things. You're constantly dealing with challenges,
Mm.
and business is like that. And the other thing that I really love about sport, that I think is really applicable to business, is sport is the great equalizer,
Mm.
right? So, you know, you see these parents who, are really, really wealthy, and they buy all the best kit for their kid. They'll get the best trainer, instructor, but the parents can't make the kid succeed in a sport. The parents
Yep.
can help them, can guide them, can encourage them, and give them all of the right tools that they need to succeed. But the child needs to get in the pool and work hard, and the child needs to want it.
Mm.
And that's the same in business too. Business doesn't matter it doesn't matter who your parents are and what your last name is and how much money they have and all that sort of stuff. What matters is how hard you work. And so, it's like that with genetics. You can have great genetics, and that's going to make things better for you. But if you don't work hard, you still won't succeed. And you see people who don't have as good a genetics, and they go on to become champions.
Yeah.
And that's because just having good genetics will not make you a champion. Just having wealthy parents doesn't mean you're going to be super successful in business. It's a
Mm.
great launch pad. So you have an amazing start in life where you come from an affluent family, your parents are business people, you get to sit in and learn from them about how they do business. You have an advantage, and you have
Yeah.
a great launch pad, and your parents, let's say, have money. So from there, if you want to be successful and you really want it, you can, the world's your oyster, and everything is achievable. And so for the person that comes from a much more humble background, they need to work with the cards that they've been given, and they
Mm.
need to really work a lot harder, because they may not be as they're not as lucky to have what they have, what the other people have. But it still doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And it's the same with sport. You can come from a humble background and you work your ass off, and you
Mm.
make the Australian team, or you don't necessarily have the right genetics, but you work your ass off and want it more than somebody else who's got good genetics, who's lazy,
Yeah.
and you will be successful. And business is the same. So just because you come from an amazing family doesn't mean that you will be successful in business. Yes, you have an advantage. Yes, you have the best possible start. And
Mm.
just because you come from humble backgrounds doesn't mean that that's what you're destined for. You can change your outcome. And the late in the Philippines, there's a gentleman, the late ambassador, Antonio Cabang Chua. I should know his name really well. He always said that rich or poor, everybody gets 24 hours in a day, and it's what you do with those 24 hours that counts. And he started off his life as a shoe shiner in the Philippines from one of the poorest areas, and went on to be one of the most successful businessmen in the Philippines, to have so many businesses, a massive conglomerate in one lifetime. And that's truly incredible. But that's
Mm.
that's the case, and I think that's the same with sport. It's the same with business. And the other thing with sport too is that you need to know that the success isn't going to be overnight. So I spoke before about
Yeah.
You start a sport and you're not going to be in the Australian team. You're going to have to grind. That's the same with business.
Mm.
But here's the kicker: in sport, you will lose games and you will lose you will lose a championship. So
Yeah.
you can assemble the best team with all the best talent, and they can have they can train very well together, they can gel well together, and then on the finals they lose to a team that may not have been as good, but they were more determined, they had more hunger, they wanted it more, they had more grit, and you know what? Things just went their way.
Mm.
That's what happens in a sport.
Yeah.
And when I was playing with Sydney Uni, we didn't. When I was with them, we weren't able to win a championship, National League, probably because I was playing for them because they went on and won it without me. But I won with Melbourne, with Victoria, a number of years later. But the interesting thing about sport is you lose a final, and what happens? So you think about why you lost, and then the next day you go back and you go to the pool and you train again, and you go in and you jump into the pool and you keep going. You keep
Yeah.
training. And no matter how many times you lose a game, you go back the next day and you keep training. But with business, when people fail in sport, I'm sorry, in business, and we all know the stats are like 95 or whatever percent, depending on what site you look at, of startups are going to fail.
Mm.
But people take it very personal, and so you fail in a business and people somehow think that that's some kind of reflection on them and their inability to kind of build a business, when the reality is there are so many factors
Mm.
that are going to determine whether you're successful. Having the right idea is one, or the wrong idea is one. Whether you have money or not is another, and all these other factors. You can have the right idea at the wrong time even, so
Yeah.
sometimes you just get unlucky.
Yeah.
But what I think is great from business, which is applicable, sorry, is great from sport that is applicable to business, is that you just get back on it. You
Mm.
might fail, but if you treat it like a sport, like a game,
Yeah.
you go back and you go back to the drawing board. You assess what you did wrong, and if there are things that you could have changed, then you work on that. But then you get back on the horse and you start another business and you work on something and you keep going and you keep going and you never give up.
Yeah.
And I think that's something in sport that you see, that I think that more people who start businesses should also adopt as well.
Yeah. Mate, on that note, because I mean, just talking about uh, getting knocked off your horse and just having to kind of get back on, obviously, COVID has been upon us for the last 12 months. And I don't think there's anybody in the business landscape except for Zoom that has not had a tough time.
Good
Um,
old Zoom.
good old Zoom. What's COVID meant to you and your business, and kind of how have you had to change what you're doing and how you're thinking and all the rest?
Yeah. So COVID.
Fuck you, COVID.
Exactly. Universally, everyone's saying the same thing. COVID was obviously a challenge, very much so in certain aspects of our business. And on the real estate side, obviously there's a hit there, with tenants,
Mm.
and then on the software development side, we wanted to hire 300 staff last year, and we only ended up hiring like just shy of 100. So I think we were lucky that we were still growing, and I think because in software development, the businesses which were not doing as well, they're starting to bring forward some of their software development projects so that they are able to pivot the business.
Mm.
So businesses that are brick and mortar might be saying, well, we can't be selling brick and mortar. We need a solution, and
Yep.
maybe that solution is software or an application that we need to do. So in this business, I think given the conditions, it was a reasonable outcome. It certainly wasn't what we wanted, but we saw the other businesses of ours that were pretty small grow, significantly. Like our pizza business was always just like a side little thing for us that was fun, and then that one went gangbusters, and now we're opening the second location, and we're looking at a third and a fourth right now, and we're building a commissary, and we're doing, we're getting importation licenses, and we're doing cold chain solutions to kind of, scale that business. And so this all comes down to a lesson that I learned from a guy called Russell Small. Was an amazing business person and was a mentor of mine when we had the online business, the online college together.
Mm.
And so he worked for a guy called Frank Hargrave, and Frank Hargrave was a founder of Skilled Limited, and he was one of the richest Australians at the time, and a billionaire and all that sort of stuff. And Frank had this advice, and he said, "You need 6 businesses to be turning over more than 10 million a year, because the reason why you need that is at any point in time, 2 of those businesses will be failing. Whatever it is, it could be market conditions, it could be, competition, it could be just a declining, a declining product that you've got that you've sat on that you haven't innovated. For whatever reason, 2 of those
Yeah.
businesses are going to be failing, and you need the cash flow from these other 4 businesses to to keep you afloat while you focus on these 2 businesses, fixing those 2 businesses. And then when you fix those 2 businesses, you've got 6 businesses that are doing really well again, and then maybe 2 other businesses might start failing. And if you don't have the breadth of businesses, then you are at risk of going under at any point. If you only have 1 or 2 businesses, and 2 of those businesses are impacted, then you don't have the cash flow
Mm.
to be able to fix the problems, and you go under. And I think that the problem that you see with COVID is that you're seeing great businesses with really good fundamentals go under
Mm.
because of no fault of their own. I mean, no fault of their own at all. It's purely because of the conditions and what's happening.
Yeah. So diversification,
Yeah, yeah,
and a lot of core fundamentals are businesses with core fundamentals are not seeing the other side of COVID.
that's correct. And these are no fault. That's from no fault of their own. Absolutely no fault of their own. It's just because of the market conditions. And so I think
Totally.
the one of the greatest lessons that I got from Russell, for me, was that you need to have diversification, and you need to be focusing on cash flow, and and so you have the ability to weather the storm. Doesn't make you invincible, but you have the ability to weather that storm so you can get through it. And so that's been a rule that I've followed in my life.
Mm.
And I'm trying to get to that number 6.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting. I got a question for you because this is personal because I've gone through this myself. It's like,
Right.
you've
How
got
personal.
very, you've you've got.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Well, look, so there are some that say that if you chase too many rabbits, you catch none.
Yep.
Right. And then the other side of the fence, it's all about diversification for all the things that we've spoken about and the points that you mentioned. So validity on both ends. The question is, how do you achieve diversification considering you have so many hours in the day?
Yep. Great. So I think it all comes down to having an A team. So if you have an A team, right? As Jeff Bezos talks about, he says, people just wrongly assume that a CEO should be under the most amount of pressure. You should be able to delegate that pressure, and if you hire the right people below you, you can delegate a lot of that stuff, and so you can have less pressure because you're the leader, right? And you're the one in charge. And so if you're a delegate, the people you delegate to can't do it properly, that's not their fault. It's your fault for hiring them and not training them properly. So to that point, the reason why I think it can be done, and the reason why I do it, is it's like this. I have a restaurant. I'm an executive chef, right, of that restaurant. I build my own restaurant. I am the reason why people eat at that restaurant. I make amazing food. I can't go on a holiday because I'm stuck behind the kitchen cooking food. I don't get to talk to the people, to the patrons.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any connection with them. I'm stuck cooking food 24/7, 7 days a week. And that's all I can do. I can only ever have one business. The alternative is you go in as the executive chef, you create an amazing business, and you hire someone better than you, and you work with them in the kitchen
Yeah.
to make amazing food better than what you can make yourself. Then you focus your time on being front of house, talking to the people, talking to the patrons, finding out what more you could be doing, what they love, what they hate, and you make that business better. But then what you do is you get that business to a point where it can operate, and then you pull out and you go and you start another business, another restaurant, let's just say. And so you start another concept with that business. And again, you find another person smarter than you who can do the job better than you can, and
Mm.
you reward that person, and you again you build that business, but you're always checking in with this business.
Yeah.
So with my various business partners, I got business partners in Singapore, Australia, and just in the office next door. And you just have to have a process. So every day from 10 to 11 a.m. I'm with Steve, and we're talking through the software development business. At the moment, we're hiring 50 staff, which is great. And I give him the autonomy to run that business, and he's incredible. He's better at doing the job than I am. And so what I'm doing is I'm catching up with him every day, and we're going through a lot of the meat of the business, and I'm making sure that we're sailing the ship in the right direction, and I'm giving guidance. But then I'm able to free my time to work on other things to work on the things that I do better, which is building new businesses, and working on kind of more the strategy kind of stuff, products, and that sort of thing. That's what I love doing. And that's where my time is better spent. And so if you don't have the right A team, then yes, of course, you cannot diversify.
So let me ask you a little bit
Yeah,
more of let me get a little bit deeper on that.
sure.
Structurally,
Yep.
because you've got dynamics of partnership and dynamics of employee-employer relationships, right? Which can
Yep.
be two quite different dynamics.
Very different.
And different strokes for different folks, and different things work for different people. But what's worked for you in terms of just
Yep.
kind of establishing the right A team in terms of just structure? Is
Yep.
it that more of a partnership? Bring them in as equity. Make them
Yeah.
feel like their owner.
So I think there's different ways you can do it, right? So and I don't think that my way is maybe the only way.
Sure.
I think it's just what's worked for me.
Yep.
There's a few things that I think are important. So if I'm going to ask you to give time to me, then you better get exponentially more outcome for that, because you are a taxi as well, and your time is always ticking. So, I need to be respectful for your time and the skill that you're bringing into the business.
Yep.
And I need to say, look, I need you. And look, I can have, for instance, I can have $1 million business. Yeah. If I can't get that business any more than 1 million, then I am the bottleneck. And so
Yeah.
what's the difference between me bringing you in and saying to you, here, I'll give you 10%. And I'm also going to give you a great salary. And you can get that. If you can get that business to 10 million, then what's 10% for me? If
Sure.
I'm getting the outcome from 1 to 10, then why is this such an issue to be willing to give 10% of that?
Makes sense.
Doesn't it's a non-point, right? If somebody said to you, would you prefer to have 1 or 9? I don't know many people that wouldn't opt for the 9. And
Yeah.
so if you see it from that point of view, that's how I see it. Then I
Yep.
say, okay, well, if I'm respectful of your time and what you're contributing, and I know how you're going to get me to where I need that business to be, then I structure the outcome based on what I need. So I say, okay, well, I need you to be getting this business from 1 to 10 million. And so I'm going to give you X amount at the starting point, and I'm going to set it up so if you can get us to this point of the 10 million, then it's going to be really worth your while as well.
Yeah.
And so that's how you align people, right? So you align people in this kind of vision. And yes, you want to have a disruptive business, and you've got a story behind you and all that sort of stuff. But you don't want to have a situation where the person who's brought you to the 10 million looks at you and with resentment and says, you brought me in and I've done all of this, and what have you given me? And one of the things that I have learned in my life with my various kind of business experiences is, if you can be, so some people go, oh, I've got this idea, and if you come and give me, your time, so I've got a friend of mine who's also a business partner who's in Singapore, incredibly smart guy, very strategic, and he's also one of the best M&A lawyers that you can get globally. It's worked everywhere from Russia, London, Singapore, Australia. And you get someone like that, and someone else says to him, "Hey, come and join this business. I'm gonna give you 1%." What does that even mean? Because your business is not even worth $1 million. So you're saying that this guy is worth so little? Oh yeah, yeah, but we're going to get it to 1 billion. I mean, who knows? Flip a coin. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
is it going to get there or not? I don't know. So what does that really mean to that person? And what are you saying to that person by saying that you're worth 1% of a business that's today really not worth anything? You're not saying a lot. And so, for me, I was always of the opinion of, if I can be more than generous when it comes to equity, I'll tell you one thing I'm not going to get. I'm not going to get someone who resents getting more equity than they deserve. And I'm going to get somebody who is really driven for um, the plan that we have for this business. They are 100% committed. They're
Mm.
not 50-50 committed. They're not flaky. They're not going to jump over if they get a better deal with somebody else. You give them a very good deal. You give them, more equity than they deserve. And what you find is these people will really work exceptionally hard for you because they see what you've given to them is more than generous, and
Mm.
that you actually view them as a partner and not necessarily just like a consultant or someone who's coming in who's going to provide a lot of outcome and get commensurately disproportionately a small sort of outcome for them for what they're producing for you. And I think that's where you start seeing the seed of resentment, because you start looking left and right and you go, look, what have I done for you and what have you actually done for me? And this whole kind of partnership has sort of been always significantly in your own favor. And that's when you see partnerships break down. And so
Yeah.
I think that if you can just view it from a long term
Mm.
perspective, and you say, well, like, what does this person really want? And if I was in his shoes, what would I want
Mm.
for my contribution? And if you can give them more than what they want, then you're gonna get someone who's really driven.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's simple in a practical sense, right? It's just a
Yeah,
cost benefit kind of assessment.
yeah.
But so many people get caught up emotionally by this word equity.
And it's my idea.
It's my
My idea.
idea.
I had the idea of it in the first place. It's not worth anything, but it's my idea. Like, it's not fucking. It's just an idea, mate. You need someone to turn the idea into something real. That's the
Yeah.
difference. And so you can have your idea. You can have 100% of something worth nothing, or
Yeah.
you can have a lesser percentage of something that's actually tangible.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about here.
But to that point, this
Yeah.
structure and the structure seemingly is really most appropriate for startup or early stage business, right? Because you got to look at large businesses.
Yeah.
There is a time and place where an employee employer relationship is a must. You cannot
Yeah.
scale as an organization and have every one of your C-level executives and maybe their directorship reports under them an equity stake in the business, right? So,
I mean, I would argue against that.
well,
I mean,
I think you can structure certain things, but you can't carve off, to your point, it's like a meaningful percentage, right? Maybe there's a different
no,
way in
because you
which you look at
can.
it.
You can skin the cats anyway. So I use Mars International as a great example. So private company, well, they were when I learned about this, and they had a quasi equity scheme available to their executives. Now you're talking about a
Sure.
business, multi billion dollar business, exceptionally diversified, from dog food, to confectionery, to like pasta sauce and all sorts of stuff, and they can do it. So the
Mm.
question really comes down to,
How's it skinned?
how can you actually do it? And I
Mm.
think that it's not just as cut and dried as to say, yeah, well, obviously, if you've got $1 billion business, you're not going to give somebody 10%.
Yeah.
And so that percentage is reflective of where the business is at.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
Sure.
to your point, if it's a startup and it makes it's worth this, then clearly you're going to give them a lot more because you need to. Because the person's like, well, I don't even know if this is going to be worth anything. So,
Mm.
so you're absolutely right. But you still can do that with a much bigger business. It just means the numbers are different. And
Yeah.
if it's
Sure.
not a public company, there are ways to still achieve what you want that person to get without it necessarily, being as cut and dried as saying, well, I'm going to give you 5% ownership of a private company.
Mate, this is like, I think for anybody listening, this is liquid gold. I mean, this is, this is not something you just kind of stumble upon, as you're building your business. You need guidance, you need reference points for how to do it, people that have done it well, what works, what doesn't work. As we've done our merger and acquisition with now private equity, and now to think about it, we do have a structure very dissimilar to what you described, because I think what you described was much more of a kind of early stage,
Yep.
more incentivizing. But we do have an incentive structure where we have our executives, and specifically the people that have been with us for the last 5-6 years, they have an incentive and they have an interest if we exit the business, and they get paid very handsomely, and they kind of grow with the business. So agree. I mean, cutting it up different ways. I think one lesson there is, look for people that have done this before and ask the right questions, and kind of just figure out the models that are out there, as opposed to trying to figure it out yourself.
Exactly. And mate, I'm not a Mark Zuckerberg, and I haven't built billion-dollar businesses, right? So I can only give advice based on what I've experienced and what I've done. And a business that turns over $10 million is sure, it might be half a percent of all businesses in America, but it's only a very, very small slice of the other 4%, or the other half, the other 0.5. That one, those businesses are significantly larger, and so I'm still a relatively small business person, and so the way I do things is based around what I've been able to do with the small amount of money that I have.
So let me ask you this: you do a deal with an employee, or somebody that you think has got real potential to help you grow and scale the business and give you the ability to kind of move on and be free, or free up some of your time, carve off some equity and get into it 1-2 years, and the guy or girl is not the right person, and they either screw you over or just doesn't work, right? Because partnerships fail all the time, right? And I think this is really important for everybody to understand, that partnerships are hard. Partnerships, what you think are going to happen moving forward, often are not. And you got to be prepared to kind of, and also be able to kind of use forward thinking and vision to look at all the stepping stones that potentially might happen. What happens though? Like, in your sense, like what happens, what should somebody be looking at to kind of protect their downside in the event that, they've carved off some equity? And
so look, I think so firstly, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I'll give you my view based on what I know.
Sure.
So firstly, to your point, business partnerships and all that sort of stuff, they're like relationships. It's like a marriage. Not every marriage works, and
Sure.
in fact, many of them break down, and that's the same with business partnerships.
Yeah.
My father always said that you draw up agreements and contracts when the times are great, to anticipate when the times aren't good. And that's not to say that I don't trust you and therefore I'm going to put all these clauses in a contract. It's to say, well, everything starts out with best intentions, and things change, and you need to have the right mechanisms in place to pull certain levers to have the right outcome for both parties.
Yeah.
If it gets to a point where the business doesn't work. And so that might be going down and looking at things like cliff equity, where you say, okay, well, look, I'm going to give you equity based on an outcome. And if we don't get that outcome, then it doesn't necessarily work out. And so if I get a falling out with you, then, and you don't get to achieve that, then you basically walk away with nothing. Pretty tough, right? But you do see a lot of cliff equity, and you can also, you can be tying, crystallization of equity and shares based on all sorts of metrics. So, right, so you can be issuing shares based on meeting metrics in the business, or it can even be time based, right? So you can say to somebody, well, I need you to be here for 5 years, and if you leave, for any reason before that, then you've got good leaver, bad leaver clauses and all that sort of stuff, and that might be that their shares are worth nothing, or you're buying the shares back at $1 because they're not committed to the cause, right? There's a number of ways to do that, And there's lots of lawyers out there which can give you advice on this. My only opinion is, you need to get an opinion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you don't take my advice for it. And with these sorts of things, I think if you're starting your first business, it's mostly going to fail. So
Mm.
just go in there and do everything you can, and give the equity away and all that sort of stuff, and just know that you're going to be cutting your teeth, and you're going to be learning lessons along the way. Just like what Facebook did, they gave that guy who spray painted the Facebook logo some equity, and that guy's made, I don't know what it was, but it was a large amount of money, millions for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay when you're starting that kind of business, and you're going to learn, and then eventually, hopefully, if you get good at it, you have one business that's doing reasonably well, and then you need to be investing in having professionals that can give you good advice, because just kind of making gut decisions on on things like taxation, or
Mm.
on on the drafting of contracts is probably going to get you in trouble at some point, as
Yeah.
you start to scale that business. So again, looking at it and knowing kind of where you are in that business, and what you're going to do is going to drive what needs to be done to make it work. So I'm not going to sit there and say you need to have all these clauses in your contract if you're talking about a business that's nothing, that
Yeah.
doesn't
Sure.
make any money, because I would just say you're wasting your time putting too much focus on maybe having the perfect legal contract when you don't even know if this business kind of is even worth anything. And
Mm.
that to me is more important. So I would be focusing more on actually getting it in the hands of the customers and validating, and then you'd focus. So it's not a cut and dried answer. It's like, it depends on
Yeah.
where you sit in the business. But I think that to answer your question again, that there's a lot of things that you can do to to make sure that it is fair for both parties, and that your risk isn't too great, that the person could get 10% tomorrow and then say, peace, I'm off to the
Yeah.
Maldives, I'll see you later when it's worth $10 billion. You just got to be smart in how you do that. That all comes with experience and professional advice and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think the takeaway is that if you don't have that experience, then it's probably a good idea to invest in the advice. May seem expensive to go out and talk to lawyers, which they are, but
Yeah.
the
I love to charge.
yeah, but the ultimate cost as well, if you don't do it, what does it cost you, right? So
Yeah.
really good advice. Mate, I know we've had a long conversation. I told you it was going to be an hour, but I think testament to the fact that a lot of good wisdom, a lot of good stories, and just good chat.
Always good to catch up.
Yeah, man. Good to see you. Thanks, Tommy, for your for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it, and I think it's going to be a hit, and I think everybody's going to get a lot of value.
Yeah, well, I hope if it helps anybody, then that's great. There's going to be, I think, a lot of people that may disagree with a lot of the things that I say, and that's okay. I'm often wrong, and I'm still learning things myself. And maybe what I'm saying is not applicable to everyone, but it's just something that's happened to work for me. And and if that helps anybody, then fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
matey. Thanks again.
Thanks, brother.